Good day, class. Welcome to my virtual classroom. In this video, we will discuss about the ethics and philosophical inquiry. In this module, we will divide the discussion into three sections. First is the ethics as a branch of philosophy. Second, major areas of ethics. Third is the philosophical methods of inquiry. So let's begin our discussion by defining first philosophy. Philosophy is a study of general and fundamental problems, such as existence, knowledge, values, and reason. And by studying philosophy, we are able to practice our critical thinking and develop it in the future. So before we proceed, I would like to ask, what is good? And how can be distinguished from evil? In this subject, though there are no absolute answer to it, by learning ethics, we will be able to discuss the theory of the right action and the greater good. So, what is ethics? Ethics is a branch of philosophy, and it involves systemizing, describing, and recommending concepts of right and wrong. Ethics is different from morality because, again, ethics is the theory of what is good, while morality is the practice of rightness or wrongness of an action. In ethics, there are major three major rather areas or perspective in explaining goodness. First is the meta-ethics. Second is the normative ethics. And lastly is the ethics of religion. So let's start with meta-ethics. Actually, concern meta-ethics actually concerns on the meaning or definition of what is right, what is good, and etc. It doesn't answer really the question of what is good, but rather it will look on the definition of what is good. So morality subjects in the cognition. So there are four approaches. These four approaches actually comes in where cognitivism, intuitionism, naturalism, and subjectivism. So in cognitivism, what you think is right. It maintains moral judgment as either true or false. While intuitionism, it connotes that we cannot define good and bad by language, but by merely seeing a situation, we already recognize what is good and what is bad. Naturalism, on the other hand, uses senses to evaluate a situation, which we use as scientific investigation. While subjectivism, from its root word, subjective, it connotes that moral judgment is subjective and there is no objective moral truths. So I'll give an example of these four perspectives. So number one is the cognitivism. According to this, is what is right is right. So according to this perspective, if what you think is right according to yourself is already right, there's no other question to it, or no, you will not question the validity or the trueness or the falseness of a situation, because what you think is right is right. And according to the intuition, ang intuition, if you will see a color green, you already have this thinking that this color is green. Somewhat intuitionism um, defines like this or explains like this. You don't need to explain a situation that is good because we already recognize by our intuition that this situation is good. For example, if makakita ta og actions that is we think good, we already recognize it as good. And if we see a situation that is bad, we already recognize it as bad. Third is the naturalism. So actually naturalism, diri mo sulod ang mga senses. We use senses in investigating an issue. What we see, what we taste, what we smell, what we hear, what we feel. We use those senses to explain some phenomenon or some issues. And lastly is the subjectivism. which is from the word subjective. If what you think is right or similar of what is your subjective view of what is right is for you, that is right. And actually, moral judgment is subjective and there's no objective of it. So meanwhile, in normative ethics is a study of ethical actions and questions the standard of what is considered good or bad. Compared to meta-ethics, where its main focus is on the objectivity of the morality, in normative ethics, it examines the standard of goodness or badness. So we question the standard of what is good and what is bad. And there are three approaches in this area. First is the consequentialism, where we evaluate our moral action by its potential consequences. While deontological, where it where it is a study of duty, we evaluate rightness or wrongness of our action, and it is how we should act according to the moral laws. While virtue ethics, its concern is the person's character, not the action nor the consequences. So I'll give you example of these three. Consequentialism. Our action, or we do this because we are afraid of the consequences. We do these things because there is a consequences of it, and the consequences of it is bad. So according to normative ethics, on the perspective of consequentialism, our action is actually based or our action is actually based on the consequences. While the deontological or the study of duty, what is our moral laws, kumbaga, unsay mga balaod na to karon, mauna lang ang sundon, regardless that balaod is wrong or right. As long as it is our duty or it is the moral law, then we will do it. And last is the virtue ethics. This one is of the regardless of unsay nabuhat sa tao, regardless unsa iyahang consequences, ang importante ani na perspective is that unsa di ka as a person. 'Di ba, for example, atong uyab, there are sa ato ang mga love life or relationship, there are instances na even though our partner committed mistakes, we do not see the mistake itself, but rather we evaluate or we see our partners not the consequence or not the action, but rather unsa day sila. Kana bitaw, bahalag nakasala siya, buutan man pud siya in the other aspect. So this is the virtue ethics. We do not value the action or the consequences. We value the person's character or virtue. And for the ethics of religion, it's simply understood that our morality is based on our religion. Ethics of religion defined as a system of beliefs, practices in connection to a supernatural being. So religion has its ethical code and no morality without the religion. On this area, it connotes that um, our practices of morality is based on our religion. And every religion, there is what we call ethical codes. If you are a Christian, there are rules under the Christian. Like, unsa man ang rules na naa sa Christian? Di ba katong Ten Commandments? And our morality is also daw anchored on the Ten Commandments. Like, thou shall not kill, thou shall not covet your neighbor's wife. Dira daw naka-anchor. While other religion, di ba na like some other religions like um Buddhism, like they are afraid of karma, and their morality is based on the karma itself. So this is what the ethics of religion means. So given those theories, we can now proceed to what we call the methods of inquiry. In making arguments, it is essential that we need to follow some rules or methods, especially when we are asked to give our arguments in a certain moral dilemma or issues. One of the methods must be used is what we call philosophical inquiry. In this, we are geared towards arriving a clear meaning of a common issue. We, not just philosophers, must be logical enough when using this method. But how can we define logic? Actually, logic is about science and an art of correct using accuracy and objectivity in explaining valid argument. I highlighted the word argument because it is very essential to know and understand that our stand on a particular issue is called argument. In argument, we must realize that it composes of two things: the premise and the conclusion. Premise, in a simpler definition, it is our assumption of something true. So in short, unsa di atong pagtuo nga tinuod? So unsa di ang ato ang haka-haka? Unsa di atong assumption? That is premise. While conclusion, it is our claim, no, ato ang claim or ato ang argumento nga mao gid ni siya. Pero kani nga claim nato dili ni siya basta-basta lang nga claim. Dapat naka-anchor ni siya sa sakto nga reasoning o justification. Second method is what we call epistemology, where we study the theory of knowledge, particularly on its scope, method, and validity. In short, our arguments must be factual and based on our gathered evidences. So, epistemology from the word or from the definition that defines theory, knowledge, particularly its scope, method, and validity. So kanina method, actually, dapat daw ta sa facts and evidences nga atong nag-gather. Dili lang bitaw sa chika nga atong natunggan, dili sa storya nga atong nadunggan or nakita. Dapat nakabase tanan sa facts o sa mga ebidensya nga atong nakuha. While metaphysics concerns on what is real and apparent, which denotes on the saying, what you see is what you get. And by this inquiry, we started to think uncertainties. We started to question like, tama ba ni? Sakto ba ni? Tinuod ba ka ni? And these uncertainties of ours are what we call, in philosophy, moral skepticism. But before that, ginahawa sa taklas, kaunon sa nako ang foodies here. But anyway, let's proceed to scientific method. I assume most of you in your high school days or senior high school days, you were taught about scientific method in science. And yes, this method is also applicable to philosophy. As we discuss those methods of inquiry, we can simply use or discuss the inquiry using this method, the scientific method. Scientific method defines as an empirical way of acquiring evidence and knowledge. Though if we look at the internet and other books, there are lots of models of this method. But let's discuss the basics. This includes 5 methods. First is identifying the problem. If we are in a situation of a moral dilemma or a given issue, we must look at first what is the problem or what makes this issue a problem. By then, we formulate our hypothesis. Again, hypothesis is an educated guess. Let me emphasize the word educated because our premise or assumption must be educated enough. Dili lang kay gicheka ni Juana, gicheka ni Christina, ato na digbuhan. Our hypothesis should be educated enough. After you came up with your premise, gather some facts. Remember the epistemology? We must gather valid and reliable facts and evidences. Dili kay manguha lang ta bisag asa sa internet, sa YouTube, which is not valid as a source of information. Though there are videos in YouTube that we can help us understand a particular subject, but most actually videos in YouTube are conspiracy and not valid or not reliable as a source. By then, we can draw our conclusion. Again, conclusion is a claim that we came up based on our justifiable process of understanding the evidence and issue. Then we came up with a result. But always remember, our results is changeable and testable. Dili pasabot kay na kay resulta, dili na din siya pwede mabag-o. Actually, ang atong result pwede pa gid na siya mabag-o o pwede pa gid na siya ma-challenge. So always remember that our arguments can still be changeable, especially we discover new facts and evidences. I hope you understand our lesson for today, class. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact us. And that would be the end of my discussion. See you in the next module class. Bye! Una na ko.